Hi, and welcome to this edition of the Insurance Experts. It's my pleasure to have my good friend on, Angie Hughes. Angie is a long-term care specialist, and she works in a larger brokerage general agency. Angie, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so first of all, I want to hear a little bit more about how you got into the long-term care business. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, to keep my story very short, I actually started in the property and casualty field and then thought it wouldn't be that much of a change to go over to life and health. And let me tell you, it was a big change. And then naturally in our agency, our health division covers lots of product lines, but long-term care was one that I gravitated to, and I really, really had a passion for it.
Okay, and why do you have a passion for long-term care?
It's funny because a lot of folks would say, oh, well, you must have your own story of a family event. And that's actually not true with my family. We are very fortunate, and this sounds weird to say, but we don't typically last very long on a long-term care event. However, I do feel that long-term care insurance is the best way to have that last piece of empathy for the family as they're, tending to their family's needs that they need at the end of life.
Okay, and I know most people in this industry, they've had a personal experience with it. In your case, obviously not in your family, but what is your connection with long-term care? What kind of made you passionate about it?
I believe in it. I believe in it. I own it, and I've seen it at work. I've seen these policies. I've had the agents that come back. I'll never forget when I was fairly new in this industry. A gal actually came into our office, and she was an older lady, and I didn't know what to expect. She came in and told us that she was very happy that her husband had a long-term care policy because it allowed her to still be able to stay in the home that they had together.
Okay. And I know you work with a lot of agents out there. Tell us a little bit about the business itself. What are your typical agents that you work with?
Our typical agent is going to be on the property and casualty side of things. So they are not long-term care specialists. It's one of those things that when people say they call you and they say, I've got a guy, that is my life. They always want to talk about somebody that's asked them about long-term care insurance. I wouldn't say they're necessarily proactive about reaching out for it, but they will have the conversation. And that's when they come back to me for that.
Okay. So I know you recently had an agent that you were working with. Tell us a little bit about this case and this agent.
Yeah, this was interesting. So this gentleman called me and said, Angie, I needed to talk to you about some long-term care insurance. It's probably time I do something for me and my wife. Now, I'll tell you, it was a year ago that I quoted him because they both had birthday changes. And he called and said, it's time for us to do something. Sent him out his illustrations, and he says, I can't make heads or tails of this. Are you going to be in your office? And I said, sure. And he goes, well, I want to come by with my wife. They came by, we had some conversations, and they have all the same concerns that a typical consumer would have.
Okay. And how old are they approximately?
They are 64 years old, both of them.
Okay. And this is a PNC agent or agency?
Yeah, he's actually owns his own agency. So he is the agency owner for his own property and casualty agency.
Okay, but he's interested in long-term care. So where did that interest come from?
His wife, actually, and believe it or not, when I met her in person, she was definitely the driver of this. Her mother spent 7 years in a nursing home with some memory care.
Wow. And she probably had a lot of bills to pay from having had that experience.
She did, but what was really interesting is her parents had long-term care insurance. Her father is still alive. Her mother has since passed away, and they both had long-term care insurance. And she just raved about it, and she knew this was something her and her husband had to have.
Okay. It sounds like she's dragging him a little bit along, though, with it, right?
Yes, most definitely. She's definitely the driver in the situation.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about their plan that you designed for them. What were their needs, first of all?
Their needs were the way it came about is their accountant actually said, you need to buy long-term care insurance. And of course, she believed in it. He was kind of not really sure, didn't really know. Like most property and casualty agents, they're all over the board. Do we do life insurance? Do we do long-term care? Do we do an annuity? So they came in and we sat down and visited with them about the right plan. And just as you think you've closed all the need doors and they've got it all figured out, the wife says, yeah, but what about this life insurance with long-term care? What should we consider that?
Mm-hmm. And I guess, what was their health? Tell us a little bit about that, first of all.
So her health is good. She takes no medications. His health, however, he's got one of those diseases, if you will, that most Americans suffer from, and it's diabetes. So I had to be very careful, make sure that they would help qualify, make sure that we're not taking too much insulin and things of that nature. And I was very fortunate. He's not. he's on oral medications and it is controlled.
Okay, so he could qualify for all the different types of options then.
He could. He could have qualified for life insurance for long-term care with an annuity. He could have qualified for all the different product lines.
Okay, so when you were comparing the traditional options and the life insurance option that the client had asked about, which did you feel like was the best fit for them?
For me, we went down the road of traditional long-term care insurance, and then she opened the door to explore, well, what about life with long-term care? And I said, well, yeah, let me explain the concept of that and how that works. It didn't take long for them to come back to traditional, especially when I asked that last opening question about him being his own business owner. And we talked about, how do we want to fund that? So they did end up going down the road of traditional long-term care insurance, mainly because of the tax deductibility and the inflation where that benefit grows over time.
I see. Okay, so tell us a little bit more about the benefits that you designed for them on their plan.
Mm-hmm. Sure. They ended up with really what I kind of call my basic Kansas quote, if you will. They bought $4,500 a month in benefit, 3 years with shared care, 90-day elimination with a 3% inflation rider on it.
Okay.
The premium ended up being around $5,000 a year for the two of them. And just showing them that I wasn't making up numbers, I did go ahead and run them some life insurance with long-term care, and the premium hovered around $17,000. And of course, we all know the tax deductibility on life isn't nearly as fruitful as it is on traditional.
I see. So probably a $5,000 premium, but maybe a few $100,000, $400,000 or $500,000 of benefits on the plan.
Exactly right.
And then the life insurance side, obviously they're getting the life insurance benefit, which is why it's more expensive. That could be a good option for certain people as well. But in this case, you mentioned the tax deductions. So how did the tax deductions work for their business, and why was that attractive to them?
Mm-hmm. Well, I knew he owned his own agency, so I knew there was tax deductibility there. And then I just simply said to him, may I ask, Jeff, how you're structured? How's your business structured? Is it an S Corp? Is it an LLC? How's that? And he said, no, we're actually a C corporation. I tried not to show my excitement when I was talking to him because we know that C Corps have the opportunity of participating heavily in that. And I explained to him that he is allowed to deduct 100% of his premiums as a C Corp.
Okay, very cool. So, if they're paying 30-40% tax rate, that's a pretty significant tax savings for them each year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, this is kind of an interesting story. It covers a lot of different facets. If they're an agent or an agency owner, you're also oftentimes an independent business owner, and you're eligible for the tax deduction. And the benefits are still tax-free, even if you receive the benefits. That's
correct.
Kind of like a subsidized way of getting your long-term care there.
Right.
Well, I appreciate you joining us today. I'm sure we'll have you on future episodes. So thanks for your time, Angie.
Sure. Thank you, Mark.